Well, thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Leveraging Patient Data in Healthcare Fundraising. We've got a great group today, and I'm excited by this topic. It's something that was just opened up with HIPAA releasing some of the pullback on using patient data in fundraising about 18, 24 months ago. And there's some really cool things that are being done with this data that's really helping healthcare fundraisers raise more money and find better prospects and really build out their portfolio of prospect pools. So I'm your host, Doug Cogswell. I'm the leader of Advisor Solutions. I've been in the business intelligence sector for a while as a firm, and as my background, we've done a ton of data analytics. Some people would call us the data geeks. We'll stop with that, though. And in the fundraising world, we have a couple hundred, 250, 300 fundraising clients across higher education, healthcare, and not-for-profit. So today, we're going to talk about what matters most in finding prospects and managing pools. And I'm going to hit a little bit on capacity, because obviously that's important, and we're going to talk about different ways of getting capacity information. We're then going to spend a fair amount of time in this concept called patient potential. Because the idea here is people come to a healthcare institution and have a set of experiences, and some of those experiences help connect them to the institution and create an engagement or an attachment that's more likely to lead to them being interested in making a donation, and some of those experiences clearly not. And we'll get into that in some detail about how to use the data to create patient potential scores and then what to do with them. The third thing is advancement attachment. So, people come out of the institution, and then the advancement team is working to really create cultivation and attachment. So they do things like try to stimulate giving, events, 5K runs, all those other things, newsletters that people can read and click through on. And that creates an attachment level that, combined with the patient potential and the capacity, helps you find the best prospects. So that's what today's about. There's another part which we have talked about before, and we have webinars on and other tutorials, but once you have the prospects, the key is assigning them to the right people, managing the team to make sure that the prospects that are assigned are being connected with. There's cases where the field officer has 100 prospects and does a whole lot of visits, but only connects with 30 of them in the course of a year. That's not good. Ideally, they should be connecting with like 80 to 90% or 80 and 90 out of 100. So that's something you want to look at. And then you want to make sure the prospects are being moved through stages from qualification to cultivation, solicitation, and close in an orderly manner. And, there's timings in these, and we did a webinar on how many prospects a major giving officer can manage. We've done one on movement through stages. And we'll actually at the bottom, write this down up at our website, advisorsolutions.com/resources webinars. There's webinars on exactly this topic. The next level in managing the portfolio is proper solicitation levels. And I was just at a conference, and there were like 40 people, and I asked them, how many of you evaluate the level of the ask relative to the capacity and engagement of the prospect? And like nobody put their hand up. Yet if this was industry, price points and proper solution pricing is really important. And so we had a number of our clients have done this really well, and it starts driving discussions about, I'm asking $10,000, is that appropriate? This is a $200,000 capacity plus person who's highly engaged and has high patient potential. Maybe that should be $50,000 or $60,000. So that's what this is about. You want to start having those discussions, and then you also want to manage field rates. Some field officers are just better able to close solicitations than others, and obviously these go together. If you solicit at a low level, you can probably get a high yield. If you have a high yield and a aggressive solicitation level, that's pretty good. So there's more on these over here. I'm going to focus today's conversation on how to use capacity, patient potential, and advancement attachment to find the right prospects, part one of this sequence. So we start with data. And in the work we do in this sector, we load and blend data from a variety of sources. And typically on the patient side, there's patient extracts. And nobody really wants an analytics tool hitting against the inpatient sort system. So usually there's some routine that strips out the inpatient visits, typically Epic or Cerner, one of the various systems that's in use, into a patient extract database. There's relationships between parties. There's outpatient visits. There's patient biographic data. There's a set of things that's in the patient system that we generally want to work with for analytics. There's then also typically a CRM system, which Advancement uses. Sometimes they're homegrown. Razor's Edge is probably the #1 fundraising CRM in healthcare fundraising, but some use Advanced. There's Blackbaud CRM. There's Agilon. There's a set of others out there as well. We actually partner with all of those companies, so that's kind of, we're part of their ecosystem. And in that world, there's biographical data, obviously giving history, activity participation, events, committees, wealth ratings are usually in here. So that's another look at the person. Now, typically in our world, there's a whole bunch of patients, which we grab and we can create patient potential scores on. Some of them are also in the CRM system, but not all of them, because they get over there when Advancement picks up on them, and they start giving, and there may be some people in the Advancement system who are interested in the healthcare institution who aren't patients. So there's two different views with a heavy overlap, but they're not all the same. Then in addition, if we're doing work, often wealth rating is done on some but not all of the people, and we can bring in just some. There's a bunch of public domain data on wealth by zip code, both at income level and property value, which is helpful, especially if you're not screening all your patients, but you're getting the data and you have zip codes. You can at least get some fields that they live in an area that's more likely to have wealth, and therefore they're more likely to have capacity. Another piece of input that's usually not in the CRM system is newsletter click-throughs. And some people send their own newsletters out. There's hosters. Some of the hosters, like iModules, will create indices on click-through rates, 0 to 5. You have 5, they click through on a lot, and 0, they really don't open anything. And that stuff's also helpful because it's people telling you they're engaged in your content, and it's part of creating a score on Advancement attachment. So that's another piece of data that is quite useful in this. And then there's books of lists and other things that kind of code some of the medical stuff or some of the Advancement stuff, put real names on it and stuff. So instead of having some cryptic code, you actually can tell what it is. Now I'm going to just, as we get into the rest of this, we're going to look at some examples. But I want to state really clearly that confidentiality across this is really important to us. And all the data and the demo examples shown in this webinar are fabricated and are not related to any real healthcare provider. And you're actually going to see, typically, clients would have hundreds of thousands of patient visits. We're going to have 6,000 because that's literally the limit of the amount of this data we're able to fabricate. So the patterns will be there, but just realize this is all made up data, and we totally understand the confidentiality of this kind of information. So we're going to look at a couple of models. I'm going to describe where they came from, and then we're going to show what they look like and go into how do you use them to find prospects. So model 1, patient potential to donate, which is built off patient data. The concept here is, from a modeling expertise or perspective, we're looking at a base population of the patient entities that are coming out of the system. And the target are those who have given to the medical center. So using predictive modeling to try to distinguish what makes the patients who give different than the patients who don't give. And again, they've had different experiences. Some of those experiences are more bonding and all of that stuff. And this is taking out capacity. This is just trying to figure out, independent of capacity, what's their likelihood to give. And generally, it's a bunch of stuff we can synthesize out of the patient data. And we group them into things called explanatory fields. You'll see more on this in a minute when I show you some. But generally, we try to create about 25. And this might be the first area visit, the most recent area visited. It might be the number of visits over the last 2 years. It might be distance from the medical center. There's a set of these things that would be called explanatory fields. The predictive modeling ranks those and puts weights against them on their potential influence on somebody being a donor. And in general, in the examples you'll see in a minute, roughly 12 significant influences to giving, and we'll go through them. So using this model, we can then score the patient population, and they're going to get a score in our world. In this demo, they're going to go from 0 to 100, and they get grouped into 5 giving likelihood categories. Potentially likely, not very likely, forget it kind of things. There are probably better names than that, but you'll see it in a minute. The second model is similar, except we're looking at advancement attachment. So we're using the advancement data. And the base is all the entities in the CRM system. Here, you know, generally they're in the CRM system because they've given something, or you want to give over some targets. So those who gave more, and then there's about 10 explanatory fields. You know, how frequently have they been giving? Have they been to events? Have they clicked through newsletters? Those kinds of things. Half a dozen things make a difference, and again, we score the base and group them into 5 attachment categories, from all-in owners to highly engaged to disconnected or detached. And obviously, the ones that are more engaged are probably more likely to make a gift than those who are detached. And the thing you want to do is find high-capacity people with a high patient potential, get them staffed, and then build the advancement attachment. You can't really control this, but you can control this. This is a cultivation. So if somebody has high patient potential, high capacity, you know, get them to an event, you know, get them the newsletter, you know, talk to them and get them giving in smaller amounts and start building the advancement attachment, because this is what your team can control. So let's look first at patient potential. We're going to look at the influence factors first, and then we're going to go to an example of where they've been binned. And again, this is all fabricated data, but it's illustrative of what we're seeing out there. One of the typically the more predictive or most predictive is the most recent area visited. And you know, this plus minus, when the modeling will rank some areas as positive, some as negative. So you're going to get a weight. You went to, in this case, the urology area, you get a plus, and you get a plus with a number behind it. And that often does come up fairly high. Dermatology, it's another one, usually a smaller population, but it tends to be more aligned with people giving. And it actually does make some sense, because you know, people with maybe higher net worth are coming in and they want to improve their appearance, and they come out feeling good about the encounter, and they feel good about themselves, and they create, you know, creates this kind of connection with the institution. This actually surprises at the beginning, but we've seen this a couple of times. ENT surgery is another one that's come up, and it runs down the list. So you've got a whole bunch of areas. Some will have higher positive influence. Some of them will have negative influence. And that's just the way it works. Age, this will vary by the population makeup, but generally it's a plus from 40 to 90, so it's sort of flat. And then you get into that middle older group, it goes up, and then you know, it sort of plateaus at the top end. Visits overall. So time and again, the more connection somebody has with the institution, and particularly if it's one of these better areas, it's good, and then it sort of plateaus up at 49. So you know what this is saying, if you've been 49 or 100 is about the same, but there's a big difference between, you know, coming twice and coming 20 times. Being male, most recent facility visited. So in a multi-location provider, not all of the locations are the same. And some of them will create more of a positive influence. Some of them may actually create a negative influence, and there's a variety of reasons why that could be. So this, obviously, as I'm describing this is nuanced to an institution. And when we do this work, the numbers will start flipping, you know, up the names of the institutions, and then we can discuss them with the team and see mathematically there's a relationship here. Does this actually make sense? Is this actually causal? And if it is, let's keep it in the model. If it's not, let's adjust it. The first area visited, the time between the first and the last visit, these are pluses. The most recent CPT group, the number of other patients related to the person, and that's plus cube root, which means it sort of plateaus. So there's, you know, 2 is stronger than 1, 3, 4 it starts plateauing. So 9 is not a whole lot different than 3. That's what that means. It's the math. Distance from the hospital plus log. It means of more influence if you come from further away, and the log means to dampen. So there's not a lot of difference between 100 miles and 1,000 miles, but there's a big difference between 2 miles and 25 miles. So that actually makes some sense, because if you're coming further to a provider, there's probably something special about that provider that attracted you, and it creates this kind of bonding. So this is where kind of the math is going along with the story. The number of distinct areas visited is usually a positive, and we break it into the last, you know, 12 to 24 months. Last are really recent and sort of back a little bit. And the last visit was in the last 6 months is a positive. And we put these in This is typically the most influential and runs down, and then there's a bunch of other stuff that, you know, we said we looked at, like, I think it was 35 factors. These are the ones that made the cut. And our, you know, our software creates charts and graphs to show the relative influence. So looking at this, we take that model and it creates scores. And there's a list of people down at the bottom here. Here's Etta Asfani, had a score of 98, was in the dermatology specialty, was aged 80 to 89, over 100 visits, male. First specialty was dermatology, the Valley of the Sun Cancer Treatment Center. Time between the first and last visit was 1 to 2 years, so it was quick. You know, the most recent visit CPT code and the first CPT code. So that created a high score, and if I went to the bottom of the list, you know, you'd have a set of different things. And then we bin them into most likely, somewhat likely, limited potential, not very likely, and very unlikely. Let's just look at this live for a second. So I'm going to open it up in software versus a PowerPoint. So typically, you know, our load time with all this data is 10 to 20 seconds, and we come up, you know, with the stuff active. So I want to play around with this for a minute. So as I said, this is a fabricated data set with 6,000 patients, which obviously you all have a lot more than that, but the caveat is there's only so much of this we could fabricate. So understand, multiply it by like 20 or 40 or 100 or something. But generally, there's a small group that's most likely. There's a bigger group that's somewhat likely, limited potential. So you want to focus on the people at the top. And by the way, we have teed in color here, so the red are the highest capacity, the hotter colors are the highest capacity, the blue are the unrated. So you actually quickly get a feel for it. I've got actually a bunch of high capacity people who are, you know, in these categories. There's a smaller group up here, most likely that's the way it is. If I click the most likely, we actually went through that a little bit here. You can sort of see what they're in. If I click the very unlikely, it flips to the 1,050 people in there, and you can sort of see the, you know, the scores are a lot lower. The scores are a lot lower. The specialties are different. Age is similar, but the visits are lower. Females, you know, kind of sort of see the treatment center. There's a bunch of other ones. So these are all getting, you know, different ratings based on what they are. So let's go to the most likely. I just want to drop down and just focus on them for a minute. Let's see, are they attached to advancement? We're going to come back to this. Of that group, some are owners, some are highly engaged. And some of them have been in the process of advancement. Some of them are pretty disconnected. Let's drill in on patient visits for those. So here I'm looking at the most engaged 333 patient potential people. Different treatment centers. The biggest ones is the Sun City Hospital and this Valley of the Sun Cancer Treatment Center. Those are the ones that are creating most of my high patient potential. A couple providers jump out, Cabrera and Zavata. And then it looks like urology from a most recent visit specialty is dominating, followed by medical oncology and ENT surgery. And you know, this is happening because the model is putting higher weights on these things. So if you're in those, you're going to get a higher weight. So obviously when you grab the high group, you're more likely to get them. But that's an example. We can go to visit details. You sort of see specialty physicians. This is all the underlying patient data is linked into these scores. And then I can see, you know, most recent visits with a detail on it. So we're going to come back to this, but that's sort of how we go about calculating them. Then we bin them, so they're actually useful because you want to grab the groups. The scores by themselves are harder to work with, and then you've got, you know, the detail for why they got the score. So let's look at the advancement attachment influence factors the same way. We're going to then come back and combine these and go through a scenario or two. So here, typically, the number of years they've given in the last couple years, 1 to 2, so it's 2 years. A square means like a 0 is a 0, a 1 is a weight of 1, and a 2 is 2 squared, a weight of 4. So giving in each of the last 2 years is 4 times more influential than giving in just one of those 2 years, and there's a weight against it. And then the same thing, the years given 3 to 4 is also, if they've given each of those years, it's more influential than not. The numbers of connections, which would be relations or other parties affiliated with the provider. Activities in the last 5 years that they've events activities. It's plus square root means like 1 and 2. You know, 9 is not that much different than you know, 3, for example. I mean, it's sort of, it flattens out. So you'll see some people are in 30 activities, but it doesn't mean it's 30 times more influential than somebody's in 1 activity. The math figures that out. Committee participation, we're actually doing something. You have to be careful with this because some of these committees and activities are aimed at donors. So if you're trying to look at things that build attachment to fundraising, you want to take out the ones that are determined. Like I have donors, I put them, they come to these activities, I put them on these committees. You want to remove those when you're doing the modeling. So you want the activities and the committees that are influencing people giving, not that are determined by people's giving. So when we do the work, we take them out. So then this is a valid way to look at it. Then numbers of newsletters click-throughs in the last 6 months, and plus cube root. So this again flattens. So 2 is better than 1, but 10 is not 5 times better than 2. It flattens out, but it is more influential. People often ask about social media. When we do that work, it's still hard to get the data in a comprehensive manner. It usually falls under these things. So yeah, that's another influence. If you've got it and it's a good shape, stick it in. But this does quite a bit. So with this, we end up creating a score from 1 to 99. Owen Veal got a score of 99. He gets binned into this owner group. There's 30 of them. He's given, actually no chart, it should be 2 of the last 2 years. We'll go to the software in a second. 2 of the years before, 3 connections. He's been to a bunch of events and committees. And so let's look live at this. The PowerPoint will get updated from the project. So again, it's like a 10, 20-second load time. We're up and running. And so if I look at the owners, let's just grab them. There's 30 of them. Owen Veal, 99 owner, 2 of the last 2 years. 2 of the 3 and 4 years back, so he's given all 4 of the last 4 years, 3 connections, 26 events, and a bunch of committees. If I go to the disconnected, you'll see the big difference. Arlana Jetson's got a score of 20. None of the last 2 years, 1 of the 3 to 4, 1 connection, no events, and the bottom, that's all going to be zeros. This is, again, I mean, if you see somebody like this, if you want to, they were a target. If Arlana was a target, you'd want to get Arlana giving, maybe get Arlana to the right kind of event and kind of boost his score up, because as the score goes up, their potential to give and their potential to give more of their capacity goes up. And let's just look at the owners. So I'm going to take them for a second, drop in on them. I might want to look at over here, prospect bio. My owners are heavily male, married. Here's the age groups of them, Caucasian. Where do they live? Well, this is a Phoenix-based medical center, so live around Phoenix. Somebody's down here in Tucson, somebody in Illinois. I might want to look at their event participation. Just going through this thing. Here's what they participated. Somebody's been in it's like 32 events. Wow, that's a lot. Who is that? I can click that bar. It's Alta Hardy. That's my leading event attendee person. What have they been to? For the owners, the ones that have really worked have been the annual season of Hope fundraisers, the foundation galas, the heart-to-heart luncheons. You can sort of see here in terms of count, there's a group at the top that are most influential. What's their giving history been? I can see what they've given to, because they have been giving at smaller amounts, but they're presumably under their capacity at this point. And these are the people I want to cultivate, so I can sort of see, and I could have allocation and all of that could be on this page as well. So that's an example of where this comes from. So when we put this together, we push this information out a variety of ways. Here we're talking about prospect identification, slicing and dicing lists, finding prospects, which is typically a prospect research job. At the very beginning, we talked about then once you get the portfolio assigned and leadership giving, using it to find coaching tips, best practices to help move this pool from initial assignment and qualification through to close at an appropriate ask level. And also pushing it out to field officers is another way you can use this to help them really focus on the prospects they most need to focus on. At annual giving, we do a bunch of work with this same data for appeal targeting and segmentation. So we're trying to send the right messages to the right people to move them through the cultivation pipeline to be pushed up to senior management for dashboards and reports and whatnot. And then somebody who's really data analytic can build the models, run the models. We're full services, so we'll put the models together, but our goal is to coach and encourage a team to do that on their own. Now let's look at one of these. I'm going to open a prospect identification, this project from the beginning, and sort of take you through how you would use this, because we sort of talked more in depth about the models and where they come from. So, you know, our world, we author in pages. So the first page is a list of people. And we've got 6,917 total people. Most of them, 6,133 are in the patient system, 3,860 are in the advancement system, and you can sort of see here, you know, some are advancement only, some patient only, a bunch are in both. And here's a list of them, and they're ranked here by capacity. So I've got Jason Max has an ID in the main database. He's in the advancement database, a medical record number. He's a male, 90 plus, Phoenix, capacity of 50 million. He's most likely patient potential, but he's detached. An NGO is assigned to him, Noah Cole, and he has been a donor, which is good. But if I scan the top of this list, I kind of see I've got a mix of these high-capacity people, different degrees of patient potential. Most aren't staffed, and some have been donors. Well, let's look at the capacity rates. I want to make sure out of that group of roughly 7,000 prospects, I've got the highest capacity people with the most patient potential, staffed, and presumably moving through an engagement pipeline, a cultivation pipeline. Let's say I want to go here. I've got, out of my group of 7,000, I've got 39 who are rated 50 million or more, and you can sort of see the numbers. Most of them are unrated, which is a typical distribution. And again, if everybody is not rated, we would often put in wealthy zip code information or other forms of judging capacity. But for this example, let's say I want to grab these bars, the 100,000, this whole group, that's 100,000 up. I just swipe over them with the mouse, and I just grab the 2,319 people who we believe have capacities of 100,000 or up, and I'm going to get rid of everybody else and just drop in on them. And then I can go to the patient potential, because out of the high capacity, I've got 145 who are most likely, another 565 who are somewhat likely. I can sort of see the higher capacity tend to be in here, but let's focus on the most likely. So I'm going to grab them. Let's get rid of everybody else. I've zoomed in on the 145. What's their advancement attachment? Out of that group of 145, I've got 3 owners, 16 who are highly engaged, 46 who are engaged, 26 who are detached, and the bright red, my highest capacity, high patient potential are detached. So for whatever the reason, they haven't been cultivated real well at this point. And then 2 are disconnected, which is they really haven't done a thing. Are they staffed? Of the 145, it looks like, Noah Cole's got 16 of them. We saw him in the list before. Ulysses has got 11 and so forth. But there are 84 up here who have no major gift officers. Let's grab them and drop in. I've got 84 people who have capacity over $100,000, high patient potential, but who aren't staffed. So I go back to my first page here. I just drop this down to these 84. Here's my list. I can go down here and get this list out of here, drop it to my desktop. I've been running in a web browser, so off a server. I've now got this list in Excel, and I can give into my prospect research team or prospect management, who's ever responsible for this stuff, and let's work through this group and see should they be assigned. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they should be put into a hold pattern, but maybe they should be assigned. It'll certainly be the ones I first want to look at. And what we're doing is we're pulling data, usually daily, from the patient extract system, the CRM system. We're loading it into this web environment where we can interactively work with it, but it's very easy to get the data out into a form like Excel where you can go and do something with it. Now, I might want to go a little further. We looked at staffing. Who are these 84 people? Because they're all male, they're married, 70 to 79, that's a good age group. Caucasian, where do they live? They live mostly around Phoenix. I can see 81 in Arizona, which is here they are. There's a bunch of them up here. Phoenix, there's somebody down here in Casa Grande. Well, maybe our VP is going to Illinois. Let me grab these 2. So go back to the first page, and I'm going to see the 2 who live in Illinois, Lily and Logan and Michael Andrea, males, age, Elk Grove Village. So they've come to my Phoenix-based facility. They're most likely patient potential, got good capacity. This one's engaged, not assigned. This one's a donor. Let's look at Michael, and just click Michael for a second. Get rid of everybody else, just focus in on Michael. What events has Michael been to? Looks he hasn't been to events, so why does he have that engaged? He's been giving the last 2 years, giving the 2 years before connection committees. Well, maybe we ought to get him to an event. Who's he seen in the hospital? Urology, Gable. I mean, maybe one of these people knows him. What's the most recent visit detail? Yeah, it was back a little bit now. So I've been able to take this entire list, that I started with of all my 6,000 people. I dropped in on a subset, and I got down to one person and exploring kind of what I might want to do to cultivate that person. So that's the idea. And so just to go back to the beginning, what we're trying to do is give a framework where capacity can be used, and if it's wealth screen capacity, great. If it's wealthy zip codes, that's fine. There's different crafty ways of getting capacity, but you want it in a form where you can work with it. This concept of patient potential, so you can find the people who have had experiences in the actual provider that are more likely to create bond, you're more likely to create the propensity to give. Advancement attachment, where you want to move the people through a cultivation pipeline from disconnected to highly engaged owners, and that's a combination of giving smaller amounts, getting them started, coming to events, clicking on the newsletter. And then you want to manage the portfolio, so that making sure that if they're assigned, they're getting connected with, they're moving through stages at an efficient way, we're soliciting them at the right level, not under-soliciting. And then we got reasonable yields from the major gift officers and actually getting these solicitations closed. So that kind of concludes the formal part of today. Got a bunch of questions that have come in, and I would say, I'd love to kind of, as I said at the beginning, we're kind of the data geeks. We love talking about this. We love working with clients. We love using the data to help tell stories and help teams raise more money for the good purposes they're raising the money for. So here's my contact information. I'm Doug, and then there's a bunch of other tutorials up on our website. This one will be up there within the week. There's on the fundraising side, you'll see stuff on managing a major giving pool, on how many prospects to assign. There's some stuff at the bottom about the advancement attachment scores. So that's what we got. So we have some questions. What kind of data is in relationships from patient data? Yeah, so that's a good question. So let me just frame this in different ways. There's family relationships, especially, I know some of you are children's hospitals. Obviously the children or the child is not the prospect, the guarantor or the parent is. And part of the story is, has there been one child in the institution or more? I mean, more, so that starts building connection. The same thing, if you keep the family relationships, that's helpful because that relationship thing is a plus. So that's a measure of connection. It's a measure of engagement, and that's what that is. The next question is, do outcomes matter? We actually have, I'm not sure we're allowed to have outcomes, but we've done work where we've modeled outside of production patient data model outcomes. And, they matter to some extent, but even if the outcome is not a positive, it still could be a strong connection with the institution. So that has usually been a lower influence factor when we've looked at it. It's not in this demo, and it's not in our production clients right now. It would be down under some of those other things. So it does matter, but it's not been a major influence in the work that we've done. How much patient data do you need before you believe you can create an effective model? A certain number of patient records, a certain number of years of data, other. Yeah, so great question. It's some of those factors for connection need to build. So it's generally I'm just screening some of our work. I would say you want at least a year's worth of patient data because you need to have enough information to figure out how many visits there are. Has there been more than one area visited? All those things are material, and if it was you just started doing this, you had a week's worth of data, You could do something, but it's not going to be statistically relevant. You know, we go back usually 2 to 3 years. Going back much before that is probably too far back. So if somebody's last encounter was like 5 years ago, an awful lot of time's passed, and it's hard to relight the fire there. So, you know, I guess I would say, you know, 1 to 3, 4 years of patient data is what you'd want to have available. And again, you could get started like with a shorter time frame, and it's going to build out. You know, in the shorter time frame, you're going to have the most recent area visited. You know, the current specialty. You're going to be missing some of the history and connection over time. And then in terms of how many numbers, so if you have if you're doing the modeling, you want a breadth of areas. So I guess that question could go several ways. If I have a hospital and I'm getting data from, I just pick a number, 10 areas, like I have oncology, I have cardiology, I have urology, and I'm getting the data just from one area, that's going to be limited because you don't have the ability to cross-compare. You could do it within that realm, but you're missing the cross-comparison with the other areas, which is pretty important. If you don't have all of them, you know, you're going to be, the modeling will work. So you want as much of it as you can get. And if you can get like a representative sample from some to start the modeling, and then you can score the whole population, that can work as well. That's probably a larger discussion. Other questions? In order to collect and to do analytics on this patient potential, do we need to purchase an advisor database? So we are advisor. We're an in-memory app, so we're an application. If you were to work with advisor, we sell software and we sell services to put this thing together. So we're trying to put in a whole solution. Somebody could work with our software and do this, but we've built these models a bunch of times, and we're pretty skilled at getting the information binned into those explanatory factors. But somebody does need, and we don't do this, to build an extract from the patient systems, because I don't think there's probably nobody would want an analytical tool or any kind of business intelligence application to go directly against the operating systems of the hospital. So there needs to be some extraction, and usually daily, into a data mart that sits in front of it that pulls the core information, and we will load from that. So if you haven't done that, there is some work, but usually there are other business intelligence systems, other systems that want access at that same data, and if that's there, we're fine. We can just grab and work with that. What data fields are most important to receive from Epic or other hospital systems? Let me just go back. I mean, the things, and they're all called different things, but you want to, the area visit is really important because they totally vary. So all of the systems have that. You need some demographics. You want the number of visits, that's important. This distance matters, and some of these are various versions of the area visited because the facility, you can sort of mop some of this up. The CPT is sort of related to the area, but I think conceptually about what they visited, kind of some demographics on them, how many times they've visited it, timing between the first and last, kind of where they lived is some of this stuff. So that's generally there, and if it's at the detailed encounter level, which usually it is, we and others can bin it up into these kinds of metrics. There are a bunch of other factors that I think the page before when we talked about the models, we generally roll up to 25 explanatory fields. When we started doing this work, we started with more like 100. I mean, there's a whole set of things you can calculate out of the patient data, but most of them aren't, well, they're all relevant, but most of them are overridden by a handful of things that really make a difference. Are the models built into the software, or are they custom for each organization? No, they're custom for each organization. They have to be. So the reason they have to be is some of these influences, like the areas visited, like some provider might have a most awesome urology department, and people come in from all over the world. Another one, it might be some tertiary group that's just not a focus, and it's not really that good. So the type of patient that would come and the experience they have would be totally different from one institution to another. Or, we know that, where's this one, the facilities. If it's a multi-location provider, those facilities aren't all the same. Some of them may have a better reputation than others. The patients that go to one may be in a different state than another. So it would be a mistake to take general industry rankings and apply this to your institution. No, that would be a bad idea. We would not recommend it anyways. In our software, what happens is, the modeling works against your data, and it creates a score. And you saw the results of some of the scores. And that score is saved in something called a project. And you saw, I went through the live version. That provides a project running on a web server. So every day the data loads, and it's creating all these bins and metrics or factors. Then it re-executes the score and then re-bins everybody into these buckets. So it's, this is dynamic. If tomorrow somebody who had limited potential came in for an encounter in one of the high alignment, like the dermatology, the radiology, and whatever, they're going to change buckets. And the same thing on the advancement attachment. This is loading the data every day, and if somebody who was detached, on the weekend made gifts and then came to more events, they're going to maybe move from engaged to highly engaged or whatever. So, but it's important to have the factors, tuned to your organization, because every organization, the way they create influence varies. Therefore, to change the model, since they are custom for each org, we would have to work with the advisor to make changes. That's a great question. Hopefully, no. I mean, the model is in our software. Our authoring is all point and click, and we have what we call no coding predictive analytics. So somebody who understands causal factors and can kind of relate to the data, can build the models. So I'm probably not going to go into building a model right here unless there's a bunch more questions come in on models. We'd gladly show you, but no. The idea here is we usually set this up because getting the data untangled and grouped and synthesized in the first place is tricky, and we've done it a lot. But then the models are just in the software. So if you want to re-execute the model, because time has passed and the influences of the units may be different, you just edit model and rerun it. And it's going to change the weights and put a new score in that will then be used to create the 0 to 100 ranking that gets binned into the buckets. And our goal is to empower our clients to do that. But if you can't, we're around. I mean, we try to be. We don't want to be the consultants that never go away. We're trying to implement a solution that then our clients own and run with and are freestanding. And we have a bunch of examples of that where they totally can build the models and edit them and adjust them and all of that. Can you explain how your software works with systems like Razor's Edge in a bit more detail? And is your software cloud-based? 2 questions. Let's go back to data. Flip back a few pages. Backing up. So here's data. These things are databases. Razor's Edge creates and so do the patient extracts. Razor's Edge typically sits on-premise in SQL Server, or Razor's Edge also has a hosted version. We are a Blackbaud technology partner, and there's a brand new API to the hosted version which will let us get the data out, and we're testing it right now. So it's a little easier with the on-premise Razor's Edge because the data sits there in SQL Server tables, and we just, we have a load routine in our project that says load these, whatever it is, 20, 50, 80 tables, and then do a bunch of cross-table calculations, create the stuff, whatever you want to do with it. It's not real technical, but that's what we do. And we can execute, SQL commands against the database to grab certain stuff, roll stuff up. In Razor's Edge, sometimes there's a table called actions, which can have a bunch of stuff in it. Sometimes it has events. It may have annual giving appeals. It may have prospect stages in it. We've seen that because it has a start and end date. If we get an actions table like that, we can load the actions table. Then in our app, split it into 3 pieces. So we create out of it a prospect table, a prospect staging table, an events table, and an appeal sends table. So we're pretty flexible there. on Razor's Edge in the cloud has been a bit challenging because they have not had the API to easily get the data out, but that is in development, and we have a beta version of it. It's coming soon. We can run on-premise or in the cloud. So, we author in Windows clients, sort of like Excel. You load a bunch of tables and do. So we're a Windows desktop authoring app. But then what you saw was web-based. That was running off a Windows server, which can run on-premise. Which is the data in the CRM, and there's usually patient systems there. It can all run on-premise, and sometimes it's a bunch of legal reasons why you don't want the patient data going to the cloud. There's different philosophies on that, so we can be completely on-premise and run under your security, or we can run in the cloud. And if we run in the cloud, we're grabbing data from wherever it comes from, and then we're pushing it. We have an Amazon Web Services cloud offering where we run it from there, and we manage administration and updates and all of that, and you don't have to worry about running an app. But our apps are pretty simple Windows apps, and I'd say most of our clients run them on-premise. That was two good questions. Under significant giving influences, does the number of overall visits include inpatient and outpatient? That's another great question. So that was this page. Yeah, so normally we split the visits inpatient versus outpatient. I've just sort of summarized them here. So yeah, inpatient visits and outpatient visits can be quite different. The idea here is, so obviously if you take this to extreme, somebody comes in, go back to the dermatology example, they fly in from out of state and they're doing a facial reconstruction. And it really succeeds. So they come out feeling really good about themselves. And obviously they have some capacity because they came in and had this elective surgery done, came in from out of state. That's like really powerful connection. If they have a severe nosebleed, come into the emergency room, and they end up with some tests, they get in your system, well, that's a totally different, and it might be the same capacity person, it's just a totally different set of things here. So the inpatient, outpatient type do matter. But it's all sort of picked up by the CPT groups and some of the other stuff in here. But if we have that separated, we usually split it. And in this case, I think we just, for simplicity, group them together. We need to, generally, we want to look at the data and see if it is significant to have it split or together. And it depends on, again, what's going on. So more questions. I'd say there's one here about the advancement attachment factors. Let me just come back to this. So this is cultivation, and this is where the advancement team can actually take a patient potential and by creating more advancement attachment, increase the potential of a gift and also the potential size of the gift. Because somebody who's equal capacity, who is more engaged, more attached, is more likely to give more. This, in education, when we do work in higher education, there's a whole series of natural attachment things going on. There's reunions, classes come together, there's sporting events, there's all these things that bring people together, and there's a whole bunch of activities. There's reunion chair committees, there's giving co-chair, whatever all those things are. The other end of it is we do work in not-for-profits where, how do you get engagement or attachment? It's hard. And you need to, we need to think through very carefully, how do we maybe take our best donors, our most engaged volunteers, and use them maybe to create events in different areas that they bring friends and connections to. So we use them to get this, kind of connection thing going. Healthcare, you're sort of somewhere in between because there's been this positive experience, presumably at the provider, and there's a connection with a provider. But there's not a natural thing that brings people back into this kind of reunion, sports, all the stuff that the higher ed has. So some of these things you have to be savvy about how you use committees, events, the activities, events, whatever you call them, the committees, what you do with newsletters and how you target it into areas of interest. All that's really important, and it requires some strategic thinking about how you use the volunteers you have, how you use the key providers or physicians that are outspoken about their research and all of that. And it's harder. It's harder in a higher in a fundraising advancement team to create engagement or attachment than in higher ed, and it's even harder in the not-for-profit space in most cases. But that's why here, you see the giving sequence kind of comes to the top of the list versus maybe activities committees, which in a higher ed might be more at the top of the list. Question, how long does it take to do this? Well, let me flip to what this is. If this is this, putting the project I showed was about capacity, patient potential, and advancement attachment. That's usually in this world in an 8 to 16 week process from when we get access to the data. We and what that takes is, we will grab the data, try to understand it because it's probably customized or formed in different ways, but we're pretty good at that. And we start creating the influence factors, the things you just saw, because the data doesn't have them directly. We have to synthesize out of the data to get the influence factors. We then start building models, and then we need to talk through these things, these different factors. I mean, is this actually sensible? Does it make sense that urology is going to have more influence than oncology, which is what this list is saying? We don't want to just blindly build the models. They need to be understood and nuanced into the organization. So that's kind of work we do, and that takes a few cycles. Takes a few cycles to run through that, and then we end up working on these pages. Now, let me just go back. I'm flipping all around here. If I go back into here, what goes on these pages? What I'm showing is a template for prospect identification, and we author. It's a palette. It's organized, into a workflow where here we've got a prospect list, capacity ratings, patient potential, advancement attachment. And we've got stuff about the people. Are they staff, biographical, geography, stuff on patient visits, and stuff on more of the advancement and participation in giving. These pages can expand or contract depending on whether the data is there or what you have on them. And even if you take capacity ratings, I mean, here in this demo, we've assumed that there's some kind of research synthesized ratings that are pretty straightforward, and everybody's got one. Sometimes there's wealth screening, and there's some wealth screening score on some other population. The rest hasn't been. So this could be a combination of a chart on the wealth engine screen. Might have a wealthy zip thing over here. It might be 3 or 4 things. So part of our work is after we start working on these models, it's actually what are we tiling out here, and what does it make sense to show? And there might be some data that is really old on screening that we just don't want to show. The same thing here. I mean, we might get to the patient potential and see that the way the modeling came out, there's a weird distribution, and we need to adjust the splits. Or people aren't registering with the naming here. So part of all of this is getting a standard template like this into a form where it fits with the team. So we work with the data, we get it in, we build these models, we work with the factors, we discuss the outputs. We start showing the results, and then we have discussions about it because it's got to make sense. And then we go through the pages, and somebody might say, "Hey, I don't, whatever. I want to, put something on staffing. I'd actually like to see prospect stages on this page." We go, "Cool. Do you have it? Yeah, it's in the prospect stage, and good. We can stick that in here to go with staffing, and we can sort of sort by how many are in qualification, or cultivation 1, cultivation 2, solicitation, or pending close." And then we can split it that way. This demo just has on this page staffing. Do they have a major gift officer assigned? There's nothing about what stage the prospects are, and that could easily be on here if that was incomprehensibly irrelevant. So our 8 to 16-week cycle time kind of goes through all of that, and then we get agreement, hey, this is kind of what you want, and then we do on-site training, and the on-site training is about how to use this to answer questions, sort of the way I just sort of the story I went through, and we also help people that former question on how do you create these metrics, how do you build the models, because we're trying to pass this off to the team so that they can pick up and run on their own. So that's sort of our good question on the 8 to 16 week and how we go about these things. There are a bunch of tools out there. Well, I think what we've tried to do is make the interaction really easy, allow it to load. So 3 things. We make the interaction really easy so you can have these sort of collaborative, real-time discussions with the data versus, we call it the cycle of pain. You go back to the database or back to Excel and somebody cuts something and you come back and look at it. No, I want to grab, people have capacity over $500,000. I want to see the people who have the highest patient potential, and I want to see the ones who are also highly engaged owners. Here's my list. Boom, real quick. The second thing is we believe in loading the data that's not there, that's already there without having to change it. So there's a bunch of analytic front-end tools where you've got to do a bunch of stuff to the razor's edge tables or whatever you have, and the patient extract data has got to already be manipulated. We just load in the tables that are there, and if it's 80 razor's edge tables and another 15 from the patient extract system, we just load it. We calculate the metrics without having to have them in the database. It just makes it much easier. And the third thing is our whole concept of no-coding predictive analytics, where the goal is, the team should be able to take ownership and just run with this stuff and modify it. It's probably how we differ from a bunch of the other solutions that are out there. Other questions? Good. Okay. Well, anything else coming? I think we covered a lot of ground here. So this has been recorded. We will have it posted and out within the week. And just want to thank you for your time and attention today. And have a good rest of the Thursday. And take care.